The argument was already happening when Beau Strickland walked through the automatic doors of Ridgeline Foods at 6:30 on a Tuesday evening. He nearly didn't notice at first. The store was the kind of ordinary American grocery that could have existed anywhere. Wide aisles, sale signs taped to the front windows, the smell of rotisserie chicken drifting from the deli corner. Rory, his 10-year-old, was already pulling ahead of him toward the produce section the way she always did, reaching for bananas with the concentrated look she'd developed since her school health unit last spring convinced her the family needed more potassium. Then a voice cut through the background noise of rolling carts and overhead music and made the people near the front registers go very quiet. "I don't care what the system flagged. You keyed in the wrong produce code and it held up my entire transaction." The man speaking wore a dark wool coat over a pressed shirt, no tie, the kind of look that said expensive without announcing it. He had the posture of someone who had not waited in a line for anything in years. His name badge, clipped to his coat pocket, read Crawford, VP of Regional Operations, in small letters beneath. The woman behind the register had not spoken for a moment. She was slight, mid-30s, with dark hair pulled into a neat bun and a store uniform that looked 2 sizes too large for her frame, like something grabbed in a hurry rather than assigned. Her name tag read Sandra. She had been reaching to void the transaction and start it over, the reasonable fix. But Crawford had not stopped talking long enough for her to do it. "This is a flagship location," he said, loud enough now that a woman pushing a cart near the bread aisle quietly changed course without making eye contact. "When I do a walkthrough, and the front end is this disorganized, it reflects on the entire district." He gestured at the register as though it had personally failed him. "What's your training level?" "Sir, I can correct the order right now," Sandra said. Her voice was even. Too even for the situation, Beau thought, not frightened exactly, but controlled in a way that took visible effort. "What I need is an answer to my question." Beau had stopped walking. Rory had stopped too, holding 2 bananas and watching the same thing he was watching. Crawford stepped closer to the register, lowering his voice in the way that made things worse rather than better. "I've been in this company 14 years. I know incompetence when I see it, and right now I'm looking at it." Sandra's hands went still on the register screen. That was the moment Beau moved. He left the cart where it was and walked to the lane. He did not rush, but he did not hesitate either. Crawford turned at the sound of boots on tile, surprised that anyone had approached, rather than looked away. "The machine made an error," Beau said. "That happens, she's fixing it." Crawford blinked once. Then he looked at Beau the way men like him always looked at men like Beau. The work jacket, the colloosed hands, the face that had been outdoors in every season for 15 years. An assessment so fast it was nearly automatic. "This is a private conversation." "No, it isn't," Beau said. "You're standing in the middle of a store." A few customers nearby had gone still. The teenage bagger at the next lane over had stopped moving entirely. Crawford straightened and turned fully toward Beau with the deliberate patience of someone who knew how to manage public scenes. "Do you know what my role is here?" "Someone making a mistake right now," Beau said. Crawford's jaw tightened. "Walk back to your cart before this becomes something you can't undo." "She said she can fix it. Let her fix it." A long moment passed. Crawford looked at Sandra, then back at Beau, and something shifted in his expression, from annoyance into something more careful and deliberate. "Howie," he said, raising his voice toward the store manager, who had appeared near the customer service desk, wringing both hands. "Pull the contract review for Strickland Pipe and Mechanical first thing tomorrow." The name landed on Beau like something cold. Howie, the store manager, a heavy-set man with a gray mustache and the look of someone who had spent a long time trying to keep things from going wrong, moved forward immediately. "Crawford, that's—" "3 locations in this district use them for commercial maintenance," Crawford said. He was watching Beau now with focused, careful interest, the way someone watches a game after they've already seen the other player's hand. "All 3 contracts are month to month. Pull them for review." Rory had appeared at Beau's side without either adult noticing. She was still holding the bananas. She looked up at her father with the expression she got when she was trying to understand something that didn't quite make sense yet. Sandra spoke from behind the register quietly. "This is not his problem to carry." Crawford ignored her and looked only at Beau. Men who insert themselves into business they don't understand tend to find business becoming very difficult. That's not a threat. It's simply how these things tend to go. He straightened his coat, nodded once toward Howie as though something had been decided, and walked toward the back of the store. Beau stood where he was for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket, felt the folded invoice he'd been carrying since Monday, Parts for a walk-in cooler repair he still hadn't billed, and put it back without thinking. Howie came forward, looking miserable. Beau, I'm sorry. Those contracts are close to half my maintenance budget. If Crawford calls the district office? I know, Beau said. Sandra stepped out from behind the register and crouched to straighten the bags at the end of the lane that had been knocked around during the delay. Beau crouched too, picking up a cloth bag that had fallen without anyone noticing. You didn't have to do that, she said. Doesn't matter, he said, then quieter. You holding up okay? She looked at him for a moment before answering, and something shifted slightly in her expression. Still composed, but watching him differently now, the way a person looks when they're quietly revising an assumption they thought was already settled. More worried about you, she said. Don't be, he handed her the bag and stood. I've had worse mornings. Rory appeared at his elbow. Dad, she said, he was really mean. Yeah. And you made him stop. Beau put his hand briefly on top of her head. Let's get the groceries. They finished shopping. He kept his face even for Rory the whole time, but his jaw stayed tight, and when he paid at the self-checkout rather than return to Sandra's lane, because he did not want to bring more trouble down on her, his mind was already running the math. 3 contracts. Commercial kitchen maintenance, refrigeration units, quarterly inspections. Close to 40% of his active monthly work. Sandra watched them from across the store when he and Rory walked toward the exit. He didn't see it, but she did not look away until the automatic doors slid shut behind them. Outside, rain had begun to spot the asphalt. He loaded bags into the back of the truck, lifted Rory into the passenger's seat, and said nothing about what had happened. Rory, who understood her father better than most adults did, also said nothing. She watched the rain on the windshield the whole drive home and twice glanced at him sideways before deciding to wait. He barely slept. The house had the particular quiet it got on nights when the old weight came back. The weight he had learned to manage but never fully put down. His wife, Kira, had died 3 years ago. Kidney disease, caught late and escalated fast. The insurance company had spent 7 months reviewing the specialist referral. 7 months of phone calls, of paperwork, of sitting in waiting rooms while someone behind a desk made decisions about her life. She had died before the appeal resolved. The company had mailed a condolence letter in the same envelope as the final denial notice. He still had both. The contract started vanishing at 7 in the morning. First, a text from the facilities manager at the Ridgeline location on Brenner Road. Apologetic brief, said the district office had flagged all maintenance vendors for performance review. Then a voicemail from the Eastgate location. Then a call from a separate grocery client, not even part of Ridgeline, who said someone from a regional business consortium had been asking questions about Beau's company and whether any recent conduct incidents had been reported. By 9, 4 contracts were suspended. By 10, 2 more clients had called to say they'd received emails questioning his insurance documentation, which was completely current and had never been questioned once in 11 years of business. Rory came into the kitchen at 7:30 in her school uniform and looked at him at the table with all the papers and said, without preamble, Dad, did you do the right thing last night? Yeah, he said. She poured herself orange juice and sat across from him. Then it'll be okay, you just have to wait for the okay part. He looked at her for a long moment, this girl who had watched him rebuild everything twice and somehow still believed in the rebuilding. She ate her cereal with perfect calm, and he thought, this is what I'm fighting to protect. He was still at the table when a car he didn't recognize pulled into the driveway at 11:15. Dark sedan. He watched through the window as a woman in a gray coat stepped out and looked at his front door with the directness of someone who knew she'd be answered. Sandra. Except she wasn't wearing a uniform. Beau opened the door before she knocked. She looked different in civilian clothes, the same careful posture, the same measured way of holding herself, but without the oversized uniform and the laminate name tag. She looked like someone who belonged in a very different kind of building than a Ridgeline Foods checkout lane. How did you find my address, he asked. Your truck has your business name and phone number painted across both doors, she said. I'm not a detective. He studied her for a moment, then stepped back and held the door open. She came in but didn't sit. She stood near his kitchen table and looked at the papers spread across it. The contracts, the printed emails, the invoice he'd never filed, and then looked at him. He started last night, she said, Crawford, making calls around 8 p.m. Beau crossed his arms, and you know this because you're a cashier. She held his eyes without looking away. No, I know this because I've been tracking his conduct for 6 weeks. As a cashier. as the CEO of Ridgeline Foods. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, a truck passed on the road and the sound faded and it was quiet again. Beau pulled out a chair and sat down. He said nothing for a long moment. He looked at the contract papers, then at her. "The name tag," said Sandra. "Sienna Ballard," she said. "I've been doing field audits in 3 districts. Internal reports about Crawford go back 2 years. Vendor intimidation, labor violations, selective enforcement of store policies against workers who filed complaints. Every time I tried to move on it through standard channels, the documentation disappeared before it reached the board." Beau exhaled slowly. "So I walked into something." "You walked into something I was trying to document quietly." Sienna sat down across from him, not with apology exactly, but with the gravity of someone laying out a problem they are committed to solving. "Crawford doesn't know who I am yet, but he knows an audit is running, and he believes that if he creates enough noise around you, he can discredit the incident before I can build a complete case." "How many contracts did he kill this morning?" 6 by my count, possibly 12 before noon. A pause. "He accessed your vendor profile through a database he has no authorization to use. His reach is wide." "Yes." She paused again, smaller this time. "I'm sorry you're in this." Beau answered without bitterness because he had learned long ago that bitterness burned energy he needed for other things. "He put me in it, not you." He looked at the papers. "But my daughter still needs the rent paid, and sorry doesn't fix that part." Sienna took that without flinching. "No," she said, "it doesn't." His phone buzzed on the table. He turned it over. A local news alert. Ridgeline Foods VP reports threatening customer incident at district flagship store. Security footage under review. He looked up. "He's building a story," she said, "before I can build mine." A black SUV had appeared at the far end of his street, idling. He noted it the way he noted everything that didn't fit, quietly, completely. "He had someone watching the house last night," Beau said. Sienna glanced toward the window without visible surprise. "Crawford uses third-party contractors for that, keeps it deniable. And the board doesn't know any of this. Half of them see his regional numbers, and that makes everything else inconvenient." She looked at him directly. "But I have 6 weeks of documentation, I have vendor affidavits, and I have last night on the store's security cameras." His voice, unedited, start to finish. "Then what do you need me for?" She didn't answer immediately. "You're not a vendor filing a grievance," Sienna said. "You're a private citizen with nothing at stake in this company who stepped in front of someone being publicly humiliated and got punished for it. That lands differently in a room full of people protecting quarterly numbers." Beau said nothing for a long moment. He thought about Rory eating her cereal with perfect calm. "You just have to wait for the okay part." "If I go," he said, "I say what I want. That's the only reason I'm asking." Crawford was waiting in the parking lot of Beau's last remaining active job site when they arrived that afternoon. He had either tracked Sienna's movements or gotten lucky with timing, and by the look on his face when he stepped out of the company sedan, it didn't matter to him which. He studied Sienna first, long enough to know she was important, not yet long enough to know precisely how. Then he looked at Beau with the particular satisfaction of a man who has been winning for so long that losing has become genuinely unimaginable to him. "You have a short memory," Crawford said to Beau. "After last night, I expected you to be home reviewing your balance sheet." Beau said nothing. Crawford turned toward Sienna. "For a district audit employee, you take unusual interest in maintenance contractors." He tilted his head slightly. "I'll be noting that." Sienna's voice, when she spoke, had changed completely. Not louder, not sharper. Precise in a way that made everything else in the vicinity feel approximate. "I wouldn't write those notes, Crawford." Something moved across his face. Not yet recognition, but the first edge of uncertainty. "Board meeting is at 6, Sienna said. "Plan your evening accordingly." Crawford looked between them one more time, then straightened his coat in that same automatic gesture Beau had watched him use the night before, got into the sedan, and drove. Ridgeline Foods headquarters stood 7 stories above a commercial district. Crawford had spent 14 years reshaping through selective lease pressure and vendor coercion. A fact that made itself known to Beau as Sienna drove and explained what the audit had uncovered. 41 vendor contracts terminated without cause in 3 years. 17 formal complaints made to vanish before they reached review. A pattern of store managers hired into loyalty and fired into silence when that loyalty showed any limit. Beau listened without comment. He had worn the dark jacket he kept for Rory's school performances. It fit slightly wrong at the shoulders. He didn't think about it. The boardroom was on the 6th floor, 12 people around a long polished table, legal counsel positioned nearby, tablets open in front of each seat. Crawford was already there at the far end, one leg crossed over the other, looking like a man who had spent so many years in that room he had forgotten it belonged to anyone else. He smiled when Beau walked in, slowly, deliberately, the smile of a man who has already decided how this ends. "No one mentioned outside parties," Crawford said to the room. "You weren't consulted," Sienna answered. She connected her device to the room's display and the documents appeared. Vendor termination logs, complaint records, security contractor invoices billed to regional operations and reclassified through maintenance accounts. A structure that had looked clean from the outside and was deeply compromised from within. A board member on the left, an older woman with reading glasses on a chain, leaned forward. "Crawford, these termination records. Were any of these vendors given the standard 60-day notice required by our vendor code?" "Vendors operating below performance benchmarks," Crawford said smoothly, "are handled at regional discretion." "The benchmark threshold was set retroactively," Sienna said. "In 11 of these cases, the performance criteria didn't exist at the time of the contracts. Crawford created them after the fact." A murmur moved around the table. Someone whispered to legal counsel. Sienna clicked forward. The store's security camera footage filled the display. Crawford's voice filled the room, every word from Tuesday evening at the checkout lane clear and uncut. The register error, the word incompetence, the deliberate public humiliation of a woman who had not raised her voice once, the command to pull Beau's contracts before Crawford had even reached the door. When it ended, no one spoke. Crawford did not flinch. Instead, he turned toward Beau in the way men like him always turned, toward the softest-looking target when the hard argument was failing. "Let's consider who we're listening to," Crawford said, his voice shifting into something measured and collegial. "Mr. Strickland has a documented history of emotional difficulty following his wife's death. There are counseling records." Beau looked at him. "Grief-related anger management, filed with the hospital system that handled Mrs. Strickland's case." Crawford spread his hands as if reluctant to raise it. "I'm not saying this to be unkind, but it's relevant when the board is evaluating testimony from someone currently at the center of a media incident involving threats against company leadership." The chairman looked at Beau for the first time. "Mr. Strickland, if you have something to say, this is the moment." Sienna turned toward Beau. She had promised him the space, and she kept it. Beau put both hands flat on the table edge. The room was expensive in a way that was designed to make men like him feel like they were in the wrong place. He felt that pressure fully. He did not move. "Yes," he said. "I went to counseling after my wife died. I had a daughter who needed me to stay functional, and I needed help making sure I did. I got that help." He paused. "Those records are sealed. Crawford obtained them through a channel no one in this room is going to feel comfortable explaining to a reporter or a federal labor board." Across the table, a board member set down his pen. "My wife had kidney disease. The specialist she needed was flagged out of network. We spent 7 months appealing, 7 months of phone calls and waiting rooms and paperwork while someone behind a desk decided how much her life was worth in administrative terms." Beau kept his voice level and direct. "She died before the appeal resolved. The insurance company sent a condolence letter in the same envelope as the final denial. I have both of them." No one at the table moved. "I didn't threaten anyone Tuesday night. I stood in front of a woman being publicly humiliated and told a man to stop. That is everything that happened." He looked at Crawford, and Crawford had made 6 phone calls before he left the parking lot. Crawford tried once more, the last attempt, controlled and deliberate. "His livelihood depends on contracts with our properties. This is grievance management, presented as testimony." "I had 11 years of contract work," Beau said, "and not a single performance complaint across any of them." Crawford suspended 6 contracts by 7 in the morning using a vendor database he doesn't have authorization to access. The call logs you have in front of you show the timestamps. The board member with the reading glasses looked at her tablet. "First call at 6:47 a.m. Crawford said nothing. Sienna placed one final document on the table, a printed policy memorandum from 4 years earlier when Ridgeline Foods had restructured its regional supplier agreements. Under the new policy, local produce vendors supplying multiple Ridgeline locations were required to meet warehouse compliance standards that cost more than most small operations earned in an entire quarter. 14 local suppliers were forced out of their Ridgeline contracts in the first year under this policy, Sienna said. 3 went out of business entirely. This policy was authored and implemented by Crawford Osgood, who received a performance bonus in the same quarter the vendor consolidation numbers were reported to the board. She looked briefly at Beau. One of those suppliers was a produce and cold storage company in Denfield County called Green Tree Distributing. The owner had built it over 30 years. When the compliance letter arrived, the business had 6 months before it was no longer viable. It closed. Its staff of 11 was let go. Beau was looking at the policy memorandum on the screen. He knew the name Green Tree Distributing without reading it. He had worked there for 6 years. He had been there the afternoon the compliance letter arrived from Ridgeline. He had been there when Francis Keene, the owner, a man who had given Beau his first real job out of the service and never once asked him why he sometimes needed to work outdoors when the walls got too close, had sat down at his own desk and gone very quiet, not understanding yet how 30 years could be reduced to a letter. Beau had watched him through the office window. Francis had never known. Beau had started Strickland Pipe and Mechanical 8 months after Green Tree closed. He had built it slowly, with Rory in the truck on weekends when school was out and he couldn't afford a sitter. He had built it while Kira was sick, and then after she was gone and the house was too quiet. He had built it with his hands and his reputation and his willingness to show up in bad weather and bill fairly and answer the phone. Crawford's cost reduction memo had been the first domino in all of it. Crawford had never thought about where the domino landed. Beau looked up. Crawford was watching him, and for the first time something in Crawford's face had gone genuinely uncertain, not remorseful, but unsettled in the way powerful people become unsettled when they realize the world has been keeping records they didn't know existed. The chairman removed his glasses and set them on the table. Crawford, did you authorize access to sealed personal medical and counseling records belonging to a private citizen? Crawford opened his mouth. Yes or no, the chairman said. The silence that followed was its own answer. Security, the chairman said quietly. 2 corporate officers appeared in the doorway almost immediately. Crawford looked around the room with the expression of a man who is still searching for the exit he has used 100 times and finding, for the first time, that it is no longer there. As they reached his chair, he stood and straightened his coat. That same automatic gesture, precise and unconscious, performance of composure to the last. And then he was walked out through the door and it closed behind him. Beau stood back from the table. He had said what he came to say. He watched Crawford go and felt the exhaustion arrive the way it always did after something was finally over, the full weight of it landing only when the body understood it no longer had to brace. Sienna came to stand beside him at the window a few minutes later. City lights spread below them in the dark. She did not speak right away. They both looked at the lights. Green Tree, Beau said. How long have you known that was connected? 2 weeks, she said. I found it in the audit. I didn't know it connected to you until I ran the vendor histories this afternoon. Beau absorbed that. He never thought about where those decisions landed. Men like that, they see the numbers. They don't see the end of the line. Sienna looked at him. What did it cost you, the end of that line? Everything I rebuilt, he said simply. Which is fine, I rebuilt it. I just needed to know where it started. She handed him an envelope before they left the building. Inside was a letter on Ridgeline Foods' letterhead. A commercial maintenance partnership, 18 months guaranteed, all 6 original locations plus 2 additional ones, signed by Sienna Ballard. He looked at it for a long moment without speaking. This isn't charity, he said. Your work record in our vendor system is cleaner than my own maintenance department's internal scores, she said. Howie has been trying to get you a multi-year contract for 2 years. Crawford blocked every renewal because he controlled vendor approvals, and you never paid him anything for the relationship. She paused. You also fixed a walk-in cooler at the Brenner Road location last February at 11 p.m. on a Sunday without billing the after-hours rate. Howie mentioned it. Beau folded the letter and put it in his jacket pocket. They drove together to pick up Rory, who had been at the after-care program in the school library. She came out in her coat with her backpack hanging from one shoulder, already looking toward the parking lot with the alertness she had developed early in life, because alertness was useful when you had only one parent. She stopped when she saw Sienna standing beside the truck. She looked at Sienna for a moment, then at her father, then at the jacket he only wore for important things. Is she the one from the store? Rory asked. Yeah, Beau said. Are you the boss of the store? Yes, Sienna said. Rory considered this the way she considered most things, seriously and from multiple angles. Then how come you were working the register? I was trying to find out if something was wrong. Did you? Because your father helped me, Sienna said. Yes. Rory nodded slowly, like someone confirming a hypothesis that had already been forming. She climbed into the truck and then leaned back out the window. Dad, she said, you should get pie. He looked at her. You always say pie fixes most things, she said, with the patience of someone reminding an adult of something they should not need reminding of. Beau laughed, actually laughed, the first time all day, and the sound of it surprised him a little how real it felt in his chest. They went to the Wayland Street Diner, which was open late and made the kind of apple pie that needed no defense. Rory sat across from Sienna in a corner booth and told her about the biography she was reading. A woman who had built a shipyard in the 1940s when everyone around her said she couldn't, and Sienna listened with the kind of attention that told Rory she was actually being heard rather than waited out. Beau sat beside Rory and drank coffee and watched the rain come back against the diner windows. He thought about Francis Keene going quiet in his office. He thought about Kira and the appeal and the letter. He thought about Rory in the passenger seat handing him tools before he asked for them because she had learned his rhythms by heart. Tomorrow would bring paperwork and phone calls and the slow work of rebuilding what had been taken, because that was how things actually got repaired. Not in one room, in one night, but in the accumulation of ordinary days that followed. He knew that. He had always known that. But for now, inside the diner, under the warm yellow light, with Rory showing Sienna the shipyard biography page by page while the rain fell and the coffee stayed warm, Beau Strickland felt something he had not felt in longer than he could name. Not fixed, not finished, just present, just here in this exact moment, which turned out to be enough. Rory looked up at him over her fork. I told you, she said simply. He reached over and took her hand and held it, and didn't say anything at all, because some things didn't need words to be true.